Hello, friends. Kaysha here, and some of you might know me from the Karis Project podcast. So today I want to share with you a few updates of things that we have going on and how you can be a part of helping us going forward. So as many of you know, my father, Dale Richardson, is a mechanical engineering technologist with a bachelor's degree in technology, and I worked for the provincial government back home in Saskatchewan, Canada, at a maximum security prison and hospital for the criminally and mentally insane. Now, as many of you know, we were exposing the improper contagion mitigation procedures for the COVID pandemic in early 2020, and likewise, how that relates to human trafficking, treason, and election interference in Canada and the United States. And this is precisely why the Karis Project has filed petitions for redress of grievance in the states of Texas, Colorado, and Michigan, as well as the province of Alberta in Canada. Now, it has recently come to the attention of the Karis Project that there was a mother in Colorado who was punished by the courts for trying to protect her children against a predator for being sexually abused and brutally attacked by the father. She's now going to jail and serving time for trying to protect her children against the evils and the corruption that we have all seen the last few years. Now, this is the same thing that we are seeing with Alberta's Minister of Health, Ariana Lagrange, who would not take the necessary actions to protect children from being sexually abused by convicted pedophiles and continuing to allow them to practice in the province of Alberta. And their licenses are currently being protected by the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons. Absolutely horrendous, if you ask me. The failure of our governments to bring these petitions to the floor have directly affected patriots like Tina Peters in Colorado, who are being politically persecuted with complete impunity, by the way, while convicted pedophiles are being protected. Here at the Karis Project, it is important to us that we the people are able to take our rights back and use our God-given constitutional rights to be able to expose the evil going on in this country and hold politicians accountable. We need especially the strong men to take charge in supporting the Karis Project's action plan financially in doing the work of holding the government accountable to protect our rights. And if you guys know me, you know already that this is my favorite quote, and so I'm going to leave it with you here today, because the most important thing that we need in this country right now is strong men. And I, as a woman, know just as much as anyone else just how valuable and important it is for us to have strong men leading our country to success. And so I'll leave you with this. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their innermost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle is to the pole. And men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. So, my friends, you've heard all that I've had to say today and the importance of the same. As you can see, we have people, strong patriots, and women standing up for what's right and being completely destroyed. Politically, financially, we have good women in this country, good mothers whose children are being completely abused and taken advantage of within the system and even within their homes. And nothing is being done about it. Now is the time to take a stand. The Karis Project has an action plan, and based on all the experience that we've had throughout the years, we have the ability to teach people how to get this done. We need to work together in a time such as this, because our time is limited. Elections are coming up, and something needs to change. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now's the time to take a stand, and that is precisely why I encourage you to stand with the Karis Project for we the people. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Karis Project podcast. Today we have with us Rachel Alexander, an investigative journalist in the state of Arizona, who is also a prosecutor in Maricopa County, and of course, my daughter's the host. And I'll pass it over to you.
No, I mean, yeah, we can just get right into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the show, and thank you, Rachel, for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again, you guys.
Yes, it's great to have you back. So let's get right into it. Um, Let us know what's going on with this state of Arizona with this whole nonsense with the elections. I mean, everybody's seeing that it's drawn out, and it seems that there are some discrepancies and irregularities. So, you want to kind of fill us in, please?
So basically, what's going on, and it looks like, Arizona is the battleground state with the most corruption in this election at this point because everybody believes now in some of the other battleground states, they have some Senate races that they think might have been influenced by election fraud. But in Arizona, we all know that Kerry Lake's Senate race is been hit hard with election fraud, as well as the Proposition 139 to legalize abortion up till birth. Tons of evidence that there was fraud there as well. And what we think is going on with some of the fraud in Lake's race is what we just discovered yesterday was if you look at the Green Party Senate candidates' vote totals, okay, he's some unheard of guy named Eduardo Quintana. Between him and the other two people he was running against in the Green Party primary, they got about 575 votes total between the three of them. So now in the general election, with the ballots almost done being counted, at this point, they've called the race for Ruben Gallego instead of Kerry. Quintana is up to 63,000 votes. That is more than 400% as many votes as the presidential candidate for the Green Party got in Arizona, Jill Stein, who a lot of people know who she is. She's got tremendous name recognition. And this Quintana has, 150 or it's a couple hundred, something like that. He has only a couple hundred followers on X. So it doesn't even pass the smell test. And everybody thinks that what must have gone on is they must have switched some of Kerry Lake's votes to him instead, thinking that people wouldn't notice. And the other, factor you guys need to know in that race is Maricopa County has a 7% GOP voter registration edge over Democrats, and it's only been increasing since 2020. So there is no reason that Maricopa County would have rejected Kerry Lake, but gone for Donald Trump. And, not to mention, what was my point? Ruben Gallego is getting more votes than Kamala Harris is. And that also makes no sense because nobody knows who this Ruben Gallego is. He's been just sort of this, troll in the background. He's not very well spoken and has a radical open borders record. And Arizona voters voted 63% for the far-reaching Secure the Border Act. So why would they vote for that act? And then also for the open borders candidate, Ruben Gallego. And my theory is the Democrats are picking and choosing which races they think they can cheat on because we're under so much scrutiny. This election, they're not gambling as much. They realized it was too big to rig. There were too many votes out for Trump, but they thought they could fool people into thinking Kerry really lost because there's a whole bunch of, not even a whole bunch, there's like a handful of noisy people who claim they're on the right who don't like Kerry. I'm sorry, that many noisy people on the right does not translate into over 100,000 voters who voted for Trump, but not her.
I have to look at this whole situation. I look at the corruption in Arizona, and Arizona is, from what I've looked at, and I've looked at a lot of the laws in different states and some of the stuff going on there over the last couple of years, and by far Arizona is beyond corrupt in a way that I can't even begin to describe. It actually reminds me a lot of Saskatchewan, honestly, because I mean the corruption is almost identical. And it's at a level that's beyond belief. When I'm looking at what they're doing there, and they're flagrantly just doing it publicly, and they don't give a damn. Nobody cares. They're just doing it right in front of the people. This is kind of like what they do in Saskatchewan, people, or even in other places in Canada. But for me, seeing what Saskatchewan did was mind blowing. Kind of like what I'm seeing in Arizona, and it's really disgusting that you guys are having to deal with that. So what are they doing now? As like when I know that they were doing some of this stuff. Michelle Swinick talked about they were doing this in the primary. So what is, and we saw the bags coming in with the extra votes. So what's going on with that?
So I am pretty certain that Kari Lake is going to be filing an election challenge. Right now, they're wrapping up trying to chase curing ballots. Turning Point USA and Kari Lake's people have been doing this nonstop until the deadline, which was literally 20 minutes ago, but it might be extended if the Arizona Supreme Court agrees with the ACLU and extends the ballot curing deadline. But that's the first way they're trying to make up some votes. I don't know if that'll be enough because with this margin of cheating, I mean, they're going to have to overcome, what was it? I think 52,000. The last I checked, Ruben Geiger was supposedly up 52,000 votes. So we're coming at it at all angles. There's going to be litigation, there's going to be trying to cure ballots. I'm pretty hopeful at this point because there was only fraud, and I have an article I literally just sent off like an hour or two ago on where the fraud was around the country because there was only a small amount of it. And since it seems to mainly, I'm only talking about the battleground states because in the blue states, most people pretty much just given up. They realize the voter fraud has been going on there for too long. But in the few battleground states, there wasn't as much. So I feel like the RNC and other people out there have plenty of resources to get involved in Kari Lake's election challenge and start looking for the fraud. And I can tell you, I've had some big names talking to me recently saying, what can I do? Here's where I think the fraud is. I want to help. So people from out of the state are having an interest in getting involved.
Well, we definitely have a way that we can get people to get involved because I can tell you right now that the people in Arizona, the current government, the Secretary of State, definitely has evidence of the cheating and had it before the election and was well aware of it and did nothing with it. And I mean, we'll just play a little bit of the clip of where it got brought into them so people can see this for themselves.
Hi. Sean. Kaysha. Nice to meet you. Tracy, nice to meet you. Okay, so we're...
Please.
Sorry.
Who are we talking? Like, what office are
Yeah.
you with? We're confused.
Yes.
Okay, so we just want to file this petition for redress of grievance.
Okay.
And we just need someone to accept it.
Grievance of what?
Petition of redress of grievance. It's our constitutional right to file this.
That's not why I'm asking.
Okay.
We just want to make sure it's going to the correct entity. So grievance of what?
Okay, so this can be filed with, there's a constituency office in here, or, okay, so anyone can take this.
Okay.
So I just need one of you guys to take it. Oh, yeah, go ahead, take it. If you, and then, yeah. So here, you can take that too.
I host an international radio show, so this is my first time in the building today, and I'm just following the process as historical precedent-setting stuff is happening. So, including all the operations that are happening here today.
What's your name?
Carlos.
Carlos, nice to meet you. Kaysha.
Hi.
Yeah.
Carlos, great to meet you.
Carlos, which office are you
I'm
from?
with the Office of Constituent Engagement.
Okay. So you like this to the legislature, which is closed for the month.
Yeah, so,
But someone in here can take it, like the Secretary of State can take it. They said you guys are in here, so you guys can definitely take this and, put it forward.
Yes.
yeah, we just want to make sure it gets to where you're intending for it to go. That's
Right. Yeah. So
you
the
can also copy
Secretary
it too and get it everywhere if wherever
so,
it needs to.
Yeah, and
We'll just kind of put that there. Those guys are from the Secretary of State's office. And when they're playing dumb with a petition of redress of grievances, it goes to the state house. And with the level of the magnitude of what's in that grievance, they should have reconvened the entire state, the state house, the representatives, and the Senate to come and deal with that before the election. So every person in Arizona has a stake in that because it's got actually evidence from Michelle Swinick that talks about the cheating in the election in the state of Arizona. It talks about how they were able to create the circumstances for widespread cheating. not only in Arizona, but in the rest of the United States, and that Katie Hobbs, who is the governor, has a vested interest in keeping that information out because it implicates her and a whole lot of other people, because the crimes that were committed were just insane. So they got some questions to ask. So the people should be taking these people to task and telling them to get it to the floor. And it means that you reconvene, because the people have the right to tell the government the urgency on that. It doesn't go the other way around. So if they have to reconvene, which Katie Hobbs as the executive has the power to reconvene, they need to do that. The people need to start pulling their feet to the fire, because you're watching this happen to Kerry Lake like it did in 2022, and that is absolutely unacceptable. You have a right to a Republican form of government. Go ahead.
Well, my opinion, having seen that clip, and I did not know about that, is, first of all, we all know Democrat, fake alleged governor Katie Hobbs is never going to convene the legislature to look at that. Secondly, if that's something that the legislature should look over, what I think they're going to do, this is my opinion, is they're going to hold hearings. We've got people like State Senator Wendy Rogers, who chairs the Elections Committee in the Senate. And she was tremendous at holding elections, especially after the 2022 election. I covered and wrote about a lot of those hearings that she held, looking into all the fraud. So I think there's a good chance that what you guys have listed in that petition, I mean, I haven't read it, but you told me some of what's in there. I think there is a good chance you can get the legislator to look at it. I don't know if they want it in the form of, a petition for grievances, because they have their own set procedures. And so, you might need to talk to, Wendy Rogers or somebody about how to best present them with the information. But obviously, yeah.
This was actually, I went back and I looked at how petitions were done at the time the Constitution was written, and I followed the procedures for doing so. The problem is that almost nobody's filed an actual petition for redress of grievances like this for a very long time, and they're scrambling to look at it, but they have to go back, and I've actually provided the common law from the rules for the legislative procedures for the United States to Texas and to Michigan. I can easily give it to them where they can see it themselves, because every single member that is in that house, whether they're a representative or a senator, their obligation is on them to bring that to the floor, and it does not discharge until that petition is read into the House. That is the way that they work. There's no option of directing it where to go, because it is done to the state house, nowhere else. And it has to be done in a public manner, and the people are the ones, based on the common law, which goes back to 1640 from the British parliamentary system. It's the people who determine the urgency, and those are things that I can easily provide. They have no other option, and people need to start grilling their people to bring that to the attention, because otherwise they're completely annulling the right to petition on a state level, but they're also denying the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, and they have no authority to do that. They're public servants, not kings.
And maybe I think too much like a lawyer, because I'm just anticipating all the arguments you're going to get back. But I do know when we have procedures that are laid out in the Constitution that have not been utilized for, 100 years or whatever, there is usually some reason why. And it's, some technical reason. It could be completely bogus. But my guess is, the legislature is going to want to do things the way they want to do them. And I'm just responding to tell you guys, if you do get pushback from the legislature, this is what I recommend doing. Not if you're not getting anywhere saying this is part of our constitutional history, because you guys have decided in some bogus, court case in 1850 that this is not how it's going to, happen. What do we need to do to get this information in front of you? Because I've worked with the state legislature for too many years. I mean, I've reported on them. I'm considered our state house attorney for my publication. And so I know all the things they do behind the scenes. And one of the things they're not going to want is getting into court and having some judge laugh at them. So whenever you do anything with them, you have to show them, look, this is how we know you won't be embarrassed, and this is how, you know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying I agree with their opinion. I'm just trying to get out ahead of it in case they try to deny you guys.
I actually looked up their procedure. They don't have one. So they have to fall back on what was there beforehand. They don't have procedure for this because they actually started to phase this out, and they did this as part of the dumbing down process to take away this petition for redress of grievances, because it's a very powerful right that was granted under the Constitution, because you have the right to have that written out, read out into the floor. And because the petition in and of itself is only it's like a page long with the and then the signature pages, right? So it's a very basic position. The brief and the appendix is where the damage comes in, because that explains all of the damages that were done as a result of the petitions. And they have to bring that into the floor. And if they refuse, this is where the people have to say, no, we're not going to take this.
Well, let me ask you, here's my attorney side, because constitutional law was like my favorite area of law. That definitely applies to Congress, but was it held that part of the Constitution ever applied to the states? Because you probably know, the 14th Amendment clause said that parts of the Constitution will apply to the states, but it never said all of the Constitution will apply to the states. So has this been used in other states?
Petition for redress were used in the state, and your state constitution actually has it in there, because every state has to have in basically the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And this is part of the First Amendment, which is required to do so. And if they don't do this, then this is where you go into the federal court and you force them to do so, because no judge in any state, because of Article 6, says that the United States Constitution, any treaty and federal law are binding on any judge in any court in any state. So they would have to force them by writ of mandamus in order to do so. And if they wanted to just play games, then you just sue the state from the Supreme Court of the United States with original jurisdiction and just start throwing down writs of mandamus to aid your lawsuit against them, because of the grave nature of what they're doing. Because the grievance that you're asking for is treason. Because when you are enacting a color revolution, when you did all of these crimes to overthrow and take out and put in someone else instead of the lawful winner, and now you're doing this again on a state level in a specific race, it is still the same activity. And you cannot you can't ignore Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution. That's just, it's unreasonable. There's no procedure.
So what you guys have to do, in my opinion, because again, I know how the state legislature works.
Yes.
If you think this needs to be done in the House, you have to go to the chair of the House Elections Committee, because that's the person who's going to be the gatekeeper. And that's who you need to talk to and make sure, hey, look, are we on the same page? Did we do this technically right? You guys are going to accept it. And once you have a dialogue going with them, you can put the wheels in action to get them to agree. Because I just sense that there's going to be hesitation. Because has anybody yet talked to you guys in the legislature and said they're interested in this?
A lot of people these guys are Democrats, so they have a vested interest not to do it. Actually, the guy that I learned this from, and I pretty much, he has 100% success rate in this. This guy knows the procedure inside and out, right? And I followed what he did. So there should be nothing wrong. He always gets his documents in, but it's because of the nature of what it is why they want to try to ignore it. And it's like, we filed one here the same week in Saskatchewan, because we all originated from the British Westminster parliamentary system. And so we both have the right to petition. Yours is codified directly in your constitution. Ours is through the common law, but it's still the same thing. And so what ends up going to happen now is the people are going to have to, because these people aren't going to say, well, oh, you got me, we're going to just stop and get arrested, right? Because that's really what will end up happening. But it is your right. It's your God-given right. And you have a right to a Republican form of government in your state and in your country. And this is where the people have to start saying, well, what do we want to do? And I'm glad that you're giving us the pointers on where to go, because there's nothing wrong with dotting the I's and crossing the T's to give them less room to maneuver and go ahead. But the Secretary of State should have copied it to every person and given it to them. That's what they're supposed to do.
Well, see, since I've been covering this election integrity stuff so heavily since I think April, May of 2021 is when I really started covering it hard. The one thing I notice is when election integrity measures are defeated, whether in the legislature versus, other entities that might be adopting them, state agencies or whatnot. And it's always some stupid infighting technical reason. So that's what, and I've heard about things similar to what you guys are trying to do, not going anywhere in the state legislature. I've heard so many people complain about the state legislature. They didn't do this. They didn't accept this. So I'm just trying to figure out and get ahead of it, because I just hear too much. And a lot of times it doesn't come down to somebody's a rhino. It comes down to some ridiculous reason that somebody is a rules person and, makes everybody stick nitpicky to the rules because they are so into the rules. It doesn't mean that they're even a rhino. But I will say this, you guys probably know since you follow so closely, we did get rid of one of the worst person in the state legislature who was stalling all the election integrity work. That was Rhino Ken Bennett in the Senate. Wonderful Mark Fincham came in and challenged him and beat him in the primary. So we're in way better condition now for something like you guys bringing this than we were before.
We'll get a word from our sponsor, and I'll kind of tell you how I went about going in on this.
Kamala Harris, the liberal California politician, some people say could become the next president of the United States. Well, Mike Lindell here, and this should frighten everyone. She's supported open borders. She's failed us as the current borders are. And she even helped raise money to get criminals out of jail. Have you seen her new tax plan? It could be the nail in the coffin for our country. That's why you should stop what you're doing right now and reach out to the top-rated precious metal company, Goldco. Goldco has over 6,000 five-star reviews, a bunch of awards, and it's helped people just like you purchase over $2.5 billion in gold and silver. Visit MikeLikesGold.com to get your free 2025 gold and silver kit, plus up to a 10% instant match on bonus silver for qualified accounts. Visit MikeLikesGold.com. That's MikeLikesGold.com.
I actually, when we ended up putting that in, the election integrity is not the ask on the petition. It's not. What it ends up, the investigation that we're asking for is when the CDC and the WHO directed, they followed direction of the CDC and the WHO to initiate the pandemic response, which I said was brought on the back of bad engineering controls, which did not mitigate disease, which I have the report that demonstrates that, and they really can't say anything about that because I said, well, the CDC and the WHO were wrong in what they did, and you guys initiated the pandemic response on the backs of the crimes that they committed. And so they need to go out and hear that out, and then we get to bring in all the things that came as a result of that. And so in order for them to actually say something about that, they have to bring someone like me in on a public basis to say that 2 + 2 = 5 to shut it out, and they can't. And that's where they're handcuffed, because then I can sit down and say, now, as a result of these things, then all of these other circumstances were created to allow them to do what they were doing on a much more massive and blatant scale, because of the way they were able to shut people out from COVID and all these other things. And those things stayed in after that. So they can't come with the technicalities of the election integrity because I know that's a very highly technical thing. I came at them with something that's the first step of the pandemic response, and then it came from the WHO and the CDC, which are basically national. The CDC is the National Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the WHO is something outside of the United States. Which, what are they going to do? They can't make a judgment on the WHO. The CDC, they can look at what happened in their jurisdiction, but they'd have to bring that information into the state house before they could make a determination on it. And then that comes in as a part of all of these things that were either A, started by it or exasperated as a result of it. And so they're, yeah. So that gives them the opportunity now to bring it in on the backs of everything else like that. So it's a little bit of a different way of skinning the cat, so to speak. Well, not.
Nice tie in there.
I know.
So none of it's about election integrity at all. I mean,
it is, but in the petition is set up where you just have a basic petition, and then the brief talks about everything that comes in as a result of that. So using the simple, because you don't want to make the petition like 50 pages. So you take the one thing, and then the election integrity comes in the brief, because the cheating got worse as a result of COVID, and Katie Hobbs is directly tied to benefiting from the COVID response, and then overseeing that election that was done during that COVID response. So the whole thing is tainted, and all of her actions as being a part of that government that brought that in, right? And she had a vested interest in protecting those crimes as opposed to exposing them. And so you've got this thread running through all of it, and because the creation of a biological weapons delivery system using sabotage engineering controls is a violation of every constitution in the United States on a state level and a federal level, is treason. You can't do that. And then we know that it was released, and that the Henipa virus that came out of the Winnipeg Biolab was released in China and found in people in Wuhan that was tied to Fauci, the NIH, and DARPA, and so forth. So they're dead, right? Like, you can't do that. And so what are they going to say? Are they going to cover for the WHO? Are they going to cover for the Canadians? Are they going to cover for Fauci and all of those guys when everybody knows these guys are guilty, right? Like, this is where they're between a rock and a hard place, right? And so this is where the people have an opportunity. It's like the Trojan horse, so to speak, right? You got something very simple to bring in all of the rest and get all the people the opportunity to actually come in and testify without them using these technical rules to shut them out.
So it sounds like, you need to have the relevant House committee, whether it's health or government. I don't know the one off the top of my head, but it sounds like if they could hold hearings on the information you're presenting to them, that would be the appropriate step that you guys are looking for.
Oh, yes. And then you could bring in Carrie Lake and her whole legal team and everybody else to show all the things that were done wrong, because we showed that the court system is being used in a lot of other cases, including John Thaler's that was in Arizona, how he got retaliation for exposing the cartel and what they were doing. And you have other cases like a girl in Indiana. You had people like multiple levels in Canada, United States. There was a girl in Maricopa County who had the courts were committing fraud and used the sheriffs to like strong arm her and took the title from her mother when the house was in her mother's title, gave it to her ex-husband, and all these kinds of things, just using straight fraud, that you can't trust the courts because they're corrupt. And so if you're bringing in this into that court and you're showing that courts all over the country are doing the same thing, well, you have to fix the courts on top of that, but also the the petition has to be dealt with by the legislature, because under the Constitution, both on a state level and a federal level, that's the only place that can deal with it.
Well, I admire you guys for, coming up with that mode, that avenue to bring this to awareness. And I think people are really changing when it comes to the COVID issue. And so I would not be surprised if you got some momentum on that in our state legislature looking at it. And, who knows, maybe our little state legislature could be a catalyst for other state legislatures around the country, because you guys got the ball rolling here first. And I don't say that lightly. Like, when I think things might happen and I make predictions, I'm not trying to, make waves and sound, get attention. I firmly do feel like we are starting to see a shift, with Trump getting elected. These Democrats are finally losing ground, and COVID is definitely one of the key areas, as well as election fraud.
Yes, and Trump even said himself, he was in one of the last speaking engagements he had. He was like, rallies. He was like, yeah, they used COVID to cheat. And actually, I had Millie Weaver
Madison Square Garden.
Yes, I had Millie Weaver on, and she had the three-letter agencies on video talking about how they used COVID to take out Trump. Like, they were, and they had contingency plans on how to take control of government buildings and so forth, and A, B, C, and D, and these were what they were giving to their foot soldiers, which coincides with what I was talking about, because she was having the plans. Then I brought out the overt acts showing that they were going back and doing this in 2018, and even before that, that they were laying the groundwork to take out Trump, and then they handed it over through Winnipeg to China so that they could then spread it back over here so that they can shut it down and do all of this nonsense. And it affected every single state. And everybody has a vested interest, because if you weren't harmed by COVID, something that got worse, like the trafficking went through the roof. Like, I mean, the access to the courts were completely cut off. People were not given access to their governments. And all of these things, like CPS stealing kids, the border invasion got worse. So everybody has and just the fact you're losing your country, right? Everybody has a vested interest. So I think that, this is something that everybody can kind of get behind and support the people that need to be supported, because this has got to stop. Like, this flagrant cheating, when I'm watching them do this, and everybody knows what's going on, they're like, oh no, it's like, 6 days after the election or whatever now, and they're like still counting ballots and saying, well, we don't know. I've never seen this. Paper ballots when I was a kid, done in one night. Everywhere.
And they lie and they say, oh, elections have always taken a long time to count. That's not true. Whenever they say that, they never can point to any incidences where it really took that long. And then you look at the hypocrisy, and the inconsistencies where, let's see, they finally called Arizona for Trump. What was it, yesterday or something? And he was, I think, 7% ahead of Harris in Arizona. Okay, so that's what, 5 days after the election, they finally call for him when he's 7% ahead. Whereas Biden, right, only won the election in 2020 by less than 1 point, like half a point. And Fox News called it for him on election night. So the hypocrisy is just ridiculous. We all know that they do it deliberately. If you call it early for a Democrat, it'll demoralize people. The Republicans will have less momentum with any election challenges or trying to, push it out any longer. They do this stuff on purpose. They've now called, the mainstream media has now called the race for Ruben Gallego. I don't know if they called it. I think it was yesterday. Last night they called it for him, even though the ballot curing wasn't even going to be finished until at least 5 p.m. today.
This is where you're watching the media, like, doing a lot of the covering for these criminals. And this is like, we're watching like World War II all over again, like the propaganda machine being controlled and doing the bidding of the people in the state who are doing wickedness. Because why would not the media be unbiased and say, well, you know what? This is what it looks like, but we can't say for certain because we want to make sure all the ballots are cured as by the state laws. So we're going to wait to see what they have to say and see where this plays out, rather than just saying, well, we're just going to do it this way and whatnot. Like, that's nonsense. That needs to stop. And yeah. How many?
Well, you heard what Trump said, I'm sure, about how he might even be using the FECC to crack down on media organizations that are spreading real misinformation, because it is out of control. And I keep telling people, I read recently that only 3% of journalists are Republicans. Like, I'm in that 3%. And it's extremely frustrating to me, you guys, because here in Arizona, there are so few of us. I mean, me, Jordan Conradson of Gateway Pundit, and Christy Kelly, who used to write for Arizona Sun-Times with me, and she's now mainly with the Arizona Globe. We are like the 3 MAGA journalists in Arizona, and we're about it. There is nobody else out there covering Kari Lake rallies, covering Trump rallies, etc. on the right. It's just an army of the MSM, and it's all full of spin. It's all full of lies. All their coverage is just garbage. I mean, it's so bad that I was at a JD Vance rally a couple months ago, and the mainstream media got to ask him questions, and they were so bad, you guys, that I wrote an entire article about the questions they asked him because they were so slanted.
And I
was there at that event, actually. The questions were actually insane. Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
Ask the first one. That's the only good thing about it. And Christy got to ask like the third one or something.
I think that anybody should be asking the same question, regardless of who you support or not. You should be fair in your questions, because if you're supporting a party, you want to make sure that you have the correct candidate. Because if your candidate, for example, is a criminal, and there's been some Republicans that did wrong, do you want that person to get away with being criminals to help the other criminals get away with murder? No, you don't. You want to make sure that you get those guys out and get the right guys in so that you can have somebody that's going to go ahead and do the will of the people. And this is the way it's supposed to work, because I scrutinize a person I vote for more than the other guy because I'm responsible for that person. So if that person is working for the other team, I don't want to put them in. I want the person that's going to work for the people. That's what you want, because you want a country that you can live in, not one that's burning down as we're currently seeing right now. And so, I mean, yeah. So what else is going on other than the Kari Lake and Gallego? We see that one's the obvious one. Are there any other areas where they're having issues in these races, or anything else that you're seeing?
There are all kinds of weird issues popping up. I think it was Yuma County was saying that there were this many ballots left to tabulate, and then all of a sudden the number increased. And so everybody's suspicious that they're dumping more ballots in, because why would the number increase? But the one I want to hit is the abortion proposition 139, super, far left abortion that would enshrine it in the Constitution. It would be just as leftist as California's, partial, all the way to partial birth abortion. And because they used fraud trying to get that proposition on the ballot, I believe that's evidence that they are just going to use fraud again in the election. It makes sense. And all this fraud, getting it on the ballot, was recorded on video, and the corrupt courts wouldn't do a thing about it. Basically, these petition signature gatherers lied to voters and said, hey, abortion is completely banned in Arizona right now. In fact, you have to go to Mexico to get an abortion. So they were caught saying all these lies, and nothing happened. It still, made the ballot. And so now, why would it pass when you have, every other race practically in Arizona? It was a Republican sweep. We swept all the Maricopa County elections with Republicans. All of our congressional candidates look like they're all keeping their seats who are Republicans. And then you've got the Secure the Border Act passing with 61% of the vote. So why would this radical pro-abortion proposition pass with 63% of the vote? And my opinion is they thought they could get away with it because they got the people believing that whenever there is a court decision for the pro-life movement, or there is a new legislation passed benefiting the pro-life movement, that you wake up all these moderate and independent women who run out to the polls and vote because they all want to kill their baby so bad, right? So you got people believing this. And I always point to the 2022 election here, where Rasmussen Reports did a survey, an exit poll after the race, where Kari Lake supposedly lost to the alleged Governor Hobbs. And Rasmussen found that voters voted for Kari over Hobbs by 8 points. That is massive. And they also found that women voted for Kari over Hobbs by, it was like almost as large of a margin. So it's a total lie. And I guarantee you that they targeted that race. And, you know, I hope that that's one that is also investigated along with Kari Lake's, because it's just a lie. They had these ads going before the election too that said Arizona has banned abortion. It's currently banned in Arizona. Again, lie. We basically, up until this proposition, had a 15-week abortion ban. The legislature passed it, I don't know, half a year ago now. So abortion has been legal up until 15 weeks. It isn't banned in abortion. But nothing happened to them. They got to run all these commercials, you know, 24/7 around the clock. And so that's the other big flawed election fraud.
I think that there should be consequences to that. And I think that media, if you're not gonna report the truth, there should be consequences. I've watched this happen. It happens here in Canada. It's egregious. Like, Trudeau has gone out and bragged that he pays for good press, and nobody does anything. And like the premiers and like, I mean, in Saskatchewan, it was happening like crazy. I mean, I watched it happen in BC. It was happening everywhere, like everywhere. The media, they need to deal with the media, because the media is interfering with elections by holding back information or putting out wrong information to disadvantage candidates and shape public opinion. That is not their role. Their role is to honestly report the truth, the information that they have in front of them, and not lie. Ads should not be able to put in these lies. Like, 15-week ban and complete ban are two different things. And now you're going to have them going up to 9 months? That is absolutely absurd. Like, that, first of all, I mean, if you look and read the Declaration of Independence, and then you understand that you cannot be deprived of life or liberty without due process of law, you have a hard time going in based on the Constitution and the to justify any law to deprive someone of their life, even an unborn child, based on the fact that you cannot deprive a person of life or liberty without due process. So now that's another argument. But at the end of the day, doing it to a 9-month-old baby is beyond reason. It is wicked. And what purpose are you going to sit down and say, well, I'm 9 months pregnant. This kid can live outside the womb. I want to just get rid of it. Like, I don't even know what to say about that.
Well, people are trying to argue that children are parasites because they can't live without the host. That I used to argue that with Charlie Kirk the other day. And so they're giving, I don't know what kind of indoctrination they're running in the schools now for people to be believing this, but this is where we've gotten to, where people just, they think that you can have a full child inside of you and it's just a parasite. It's not even human. It's crazy to me. But if you kill a pregnant woman, it's double homicide. Like, you know, the contradictions we have in our law is insane. Either it's safe or it's not. And I take the position that God says that we are created people once we at inception, at conception, and I don't believe in abortion. So I think if you can just killing a baby at 1 day pregnant, then you can justify killing it at 9 months. And I think this is how we got here, because eventually they would just keep pushing the line, and if you give an inch, they'll take a mile. So
we're gonna have to close off this segment right here, but in the next segment we will continue this conversation on abortion, because this is something that they slipped in there, and this is one of the reasons for the cheating. So we're going to come in, and I'll close off this segment, and then we will pick this up at the beginning of the next segment. And so I'll close, Rachel, just on this segment here. Tell people where they can reach you, and then I'll close it out, and then we'll pick this up after. Go ahead, Rachel.
So I mainly write for the Arizona Sun-Times, so you can find my articles 5 days a week there, but I do spend all my time on X. So my username is Rach_IC.
All right. So support her, and support the work she's doing, because we need to have more independent journalists that are going to give the accurate description of what's going on, because the media is lying like crazy. And that needs to be dealt with. Like, you can't have media that's going to lie. You need to have them exposing the truth, whatever the truth may be, so that the people can make informed decisions instead of having pure misinformation or lies that are going to damage the public. And we'll actually delve into that a little bit more on the next segment about some of the issues that we're seeing because of bad media practices. And I'll close this here with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. And Father, I ask of you this day to have the men and women stand up and work together so that they can protect the children and bring our families, our communities, our churches, and our nation back together and back to some sensibility, that we can have the rule of law until we see you get the work done and see you coming in the clouds. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. And Kaysha, we'll give you final thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Dad, for the prayer as always. Thank you, everybody, tuning in. Please go and check out Rachel's page. Also, Conrad, sir, and she mentioned, check out the conservative journalism in Arizona and in America. There doesn't seem to be. We do need more of a voice on the conservative end of things, because there are a lot of lies that need to be mitigated. Make sure you check those out, because there are still good people who are trying to spread truth, and they deserve all the attention for their. So we're going to continue this in the next segment. Continue watching, or go to the next episode. I guess for you guys, I'll see it the next day. But we'll catch you guys in the next one, and until we meet again, my friend, and we will chat out.
The older we get, the less IGF-1 is produced by our bodies naturally. When you're born, you have tons of it. That's why you feel so great in your 20s. The great news is you can replenish the hormone of your youth. Just like multivitamins that you take every day, you can supplement the natural IGF levels in your body. You can do this with clinically proven IGF-1 Plus from Nutronics Labs. That is the stuff that helps you regain IGF-1 and feel great. You spray it in your mouth a couple times a day and boom, lean muscle gain, healthy weight loss, more restful sleep, positive energy gain, crystal clear thinking, all these things. There's a reason why athletes and celebrities like Mario Lopez and Stallone are big fans of this product. These are benefits from the proper levels of IGF in your system, which naturally you lose over time. So go do the research on your own at naturaligf.com. That's naturaligf.com. Great deals over there, by the way, when you put the products on auto ship, and you should. You can cancel anytime, but you should try the stuff for about 3 months to really see the positive gains. Use code FrankSpeech to save 50% off and get a free 300K Platinum valued at $300 when you join AutoShip. So head on over to naturaligf.com. That's naturaligf.com and get your energy back.
All right, we're back again. So the issue here that we're seeing that's this disturbing trend is that they're bringing in this abortion bill tied to the cheating. Now, why would they do that? Like, why would you tie this bill for 9 months, which is extremely excessive? Even some people that agree with abortion, they can't rationalize having a 9-month abortion. Like a child that 5 minutes before it's born, you could decide to just kill it. And it's a very grotesque procedure in order to do that. I mean, what are your thoughts coming back from this on why they're doing this, Rachel? I'm just wanting to hear what you're thinking or what you've heard.
Well, to me, it makes sense if you're going to cheat on a race, an abortion proposition is your first choice, because that way, no matter what race you cheat on, you can just say the abortion issue brought out all these voters we would normally not have, all these moderate and independent women voters. And so they got out and they voted. And so you can use it to justify the cheating in Kari Lake's race. You can say, well, Kari Lake was too pro-life, so all these moderate and swing women voters came out, and besides voting for the abortion proposition, they voted against her. So that's a lot of the rationale. I think the rest of the rationale has to do with, I think a lot of the left is very anti-Christian. And so a lot of their default positions come down to whatever they think is against Christians. And even though you don't have to be a Christian to be pro-life, for a lot of us, that is a huge part of why we're pro-life. I mean, I could definitely make a very strong argument and be pro-life without being Christian. But for those of us, the Bible says, I knew you when you were in the womb. So the Bible has spoken very strongly about abortion being against our religious tenets. So I think the left is just driven by this absolute hatred. They don't want to be reminded of their sins. They don't want to be reminded of, things that Christians stand for. They want to keep living their sinful lifestyles. And one of them is, you get to do this sex out of marriage, have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want, that goes against the Christian religion. And if you have abortion, you can make excuses for that. They know it annoys us. They know it ticks us off.
Well, it comes back down to this, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's not the way it works. They're trying to allow you to do whatever you want to do without having the consequences. And one of the consequences of having sex is having a child. And at the end of the day, like, they sit down and they use the most extreme cases. Almost 99% of abortions is because I want to, right? Because when you're taking a child out from a tubal pregnancy, child's usually dead. You just don't want the stuff to decay in you and rupture your fallopian tube and cause you more harm, right? And so there's very limited instances because where this is going to be used. And most of the time it's because I want to. So if you decide to go ahead and engage in a certain situation, there are consequences for that. And taking away consequences is why we're here where we are. Because when you look at this whole woke society that they're pushing on people, they're taking away consequences for people's behavior, then pushing them out into the world that they have natural consequences and they can't survive in it. This is why we're seeing our whole society breaking down. And the brakes need to be put on this fast because it is unconscionable, because that's murder. The Bible says thou shalt not kill. You're killing someone. And it's not a clump of cells. It's a human being. The kids, you see the poor little babies in there trying to fight for their life when they're trying to go ahead and get rid of them. So why is the kid, I mean, if it was just a clump of cells that didn't know anything, why is it trying to fight for its life? Right? Like,
and I feel like, we thought Roe versus Wade being reversed was going to make the country a little more pro-life because you'd have all these red states, passing these pro-life laws. And the reality is it's not turned out that way. The reality is these red states have been, coerced into, like Arizona, we were coerced into passing a 15-week law instead of allowing our old abortion ban to go into effect. And then you add into the cheating to get these abortion laws passed in the red states. We are a huge pro-abortion nation now. And the left has gaslighted people so bad that my leftist friend, who I talk about on X all the time, he went along with Kamala Harris that abortion is the biggest issue that people need to be concerned about in the election. And that's all he ever talks about. And he said the other day that he's so upset with the election results that he can't wait to move to Portugal. Well, guess what Portugal's laws are compared to the super blue state that he lives in? He lives in a state where abortion is legal right up through birth. And Portugal at least bans abortion after, I think it's 10 weeks. And then when you are allowed to get it, there's a 3-day waiting period. So do you see how backwards this is? I mean, here we have the most lax abortion laws practically in the world at this point, and the left is still lying and still gaslighting. And I just have to point out one more thing. They're so desperate at this point because nobody's actually dying of abortions. Saying these women that are having, problems with their uteruses were related to the fact they couldn't get an abortion, coming out after the fact that that's not true with any of these women. They're just lying and spinning.
well, the reason why they're wanting to have a lot of this stuff is because it is something that they can continue to promote this lifestyle of degeneracy. Because when you can just go and kill a child at will, then it doesn't put you in a situation where you have to have the thoughts of, okay, well, I should form a family and everything else like this. And it's not making you think beforehand. Because before, I look at, when I read my Bible as a Christian, it makes more sense. Because if you wait until you're married to have sex, then you're going to have a foundation so that when a baby does come along, you're going to have a supportive network and all of these things, which they don't tell people. And you can't tell people that, if you don't want to have a baby, don't have sex. Because if you don't want to get pregnant, the only thing 100% that will prevent a baby is not having sex. Why don't they tell people it? Well, they're not going to listen. Well, because you're promoting them to do this filthy behavior. And then covering up the fact that a lot of these people are getting abused, and then there's a child that comes in and you just want to get them to have an abortion to cover up your wickedness. No, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with what they're doing. They need to have some sensibility, and the fact that they're tying it to cheating should tell you right there that this is not something good. Not something good. And where was it? I saw on they had it on X somewhere. There were doctors talking about the value of the body parts of the babies when they were aborting them. And they were having a conversation. saying, "Oh, that's another $1,500 or that's X amount of dollars," and they had them on a camera, and I was like, "What?"
Gross. So sad.
Yes,
And I gotta just add, you guys, I feel like, the left is kind of gotten ahead of us on this abortion issue. They're winning. And I think, and I served on the board of Arizona Right to Life for 5 years. So this issue is near and dear to me, and I have learned a lot about it. I feel like they won the argument when it comes to this is a woman's body. And so that's where we have to take it back for them. We have to say, no, this isn't, we don't want to control women's bodies. This is not about controlling women's bodies, because this is not the woman's body. This is the baby's body. So I don't have all the answers as how to phrase that better, but that's what it comes down to. We got to flip that.
Go ahead, Kaysha.
Honestly, I'm really tired of hearing about this, because woman's body, then for one, you should start under consequences for your actions. If you don't want children, stop having sex. Okay? Like, that's first and foremost. Stop having sex outside of marriage. Secondly, even if you end up not liking the guy that you were with, what did the baby do to deserve that? I used to be married to somebody. I'm divorced. The person that I was married to was convicted of beating me so badly and putting me in the hospital. He almost killed me. I got pregnant with this person, and I never once thought to myself, let me kill this child because this man beats me senseless and chokes me or punches me in the face. No, I thought, this child is still half of me. This child didn't do anything. It didn't ask to be here. I should create an environment where I can be a kid and create a different life with this child. I ended up keeping the kid. Unfortunately, because of how badly I was beaten and abused, the child is with me. So, you cannot make decisions for the life of somebody else just because you chose to make a decision that you don't want the consequences of. That's not fair. You can't just become a murderer and make your womb a graveyard just because you don't like the consequences of your actions. And like you said, they'll go to countries where it's even more strict and there's more restrictions on what they can and cannot do, and they won't like the consequences of that. When they go and take side measures and decide to do a back-end abortion in the streets, health care to help themselves in the hospital, they'll be singing a different tune.
But there's also the aspect of this where there's at least three people involved in a pregnancy, and this is what they don't want to talk about. Because yes, the baby may be housed inside of the woman's body, but genetically distinct because it has genes from the father as well as the mother. So now you have the father and his genetic contribution, the mother and her genetic contribution, and that genetic contribution becomes a whole new life in itself. So at the very minimum, you have three people. Yes, it's inside the woman's body, but that baby is not the mother's body. And that termination of that pregnancy or killing the child is going to affect three people, not one. It's not the mother that it affects, it's three people. Now, when you get one person who has absolute rule over something that's going to affect three people and they have no say, and the only person that can speak up for that unborn child are the parents, so then you basically shut everybody up. That is called tyranny. You can't do that. You're giving one person complete and utter control in one aspect, and both of the other two people are slaves to the will of one person. Now, what woman would want to be in her house and have her husband have absolute control over her and her children, and they don't get a say? Would they like that if the children were born? No, they wouldn't. So why would you do that? In reverse, something that you wouldn't want for yourself. Because human beings, this is the only way that we can reproduce ourselves. That's just the way it works. So if you don't want a baby, make sure you don't have one, and if you do, deal with it. Right? That's really it.
And I like to add on a positive note. I've been saying for years and years now, and it hasn't happened yet. Maybe Elon Musk will be the answer. Eventually they're going to be able to raise babies outside of the womb. And I think that the pro-life movement will step up. And when, these babies are so little, whether it's 6 weeks or whatever, the pro-life movement will be like, look, lady, if you want to abort your kid, we will give you money so we can take your baby and have it raised outside of your womb instead.
Then those women will end up feeling bad because a lot of people will just say, I'll go and the kid. People that want to have kids will go out and have kids and do it that way. And then, you know what I mean? It's
Just
going to
get money.
It'll blow up in their faces. Like, trust me,
Yeah.
It never works out the way that they want. But I mean, it'll work out for people who don't want to have kids that don't have kids. But before you go on,
But most women, the reason.
Go ahead, Kaysha. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the reason why most women want to actually kill the child, they don't want to give birth to it, is because they don't want the potential of that child coming looking for them later on in life. So this shows it has nothing to do with my body, my choice. It's them completely evading the consequences, because if it was just that, they could literally just give give birth to the kid and give it away to somebody who can care and love for the kid. They don't want that child looking for them later on in life and having to deal with the consequences and then feeling bad for the rest of their life that this child exists. It's about completely removing yourself from consequences, all accountability as a woman, and being able to do whatever you want without any repercussions whatsoever. I can't hear you. Sorry.
One thing I will say, and this is something that people on the pro-life side should do better, is that when the people do have the children and make that right decision, they need to support them better, especially if the woman is a single mother, because the Bible does give us the charge to look after the fatherless, the widows, and the oppressed. And the reason why they tell us to look after the fatherless is because the worst outcomes for a child is in a single mother home, because they are vulnerable, they don't have the protection of the men, and they're not designed to take the pressures that the men are. They're different. Like I tell everybody, I said the role of the mother is the most important. Number one job on planet Earth. Number two is the father, but they're designed to work together, right? And God knew what he was doing for us to get to the best point in time. But the whole point of the matter is that the mothers don't have the physical strength. They can't take the punishment that the fathers. God does design the fathers to protect the wife and the children so that they could go ahead and she could go ahead and nurture the little kids to come up and so forth. And so if the father is not there, then they need to help support them, because when you look at abusive children, it's much higher in single mother homes than it is in single fathers and in two-parent families. So we want to reduce that, because what are they doing now? And with the society, that the way that they're breaking it down now, with the increase of degeneracy, you're going to have more single mother homes, and you're going to have more problems. And we want to stem that by supporting them to try to help them to form families and to support the children so that they can have some better influence. Because when you have a child and you're by yourself, you're the lowest socioeconomic status as a single mother. It's not even close. So we got to help with that.
And I want to piggyback on what you were saying there. One thing that I learned when I was on the board of Arizona Right to Life for 5 years is I could not believe how many crisis pregnancy centers are out there. Like, there's always these people out there who are like, oh, we're not really helping these women who choose to give their babies up, or they need help as a single mother. It's actually not true. There are so many crisis pregnancy centers, like here in Phoenix area, that I couldn't even keep track of them. I mean, it's phenomenal, the resources that are out there for single mothers, and all of our churches. I mean, I don't know about your guys' churches, but my church, what it does for single mothers is just incredible. It's like a partnership with all of these crisis pregnancy centers. So we're in very good condition right there. And then I wanted to add to your point about single moms raising children. I've gotten to know a Dr. Warren Farrell, who's one of the foremost experts on raising children, especially boys. And he wrote this book recently called The Boy Crisis. And he actually goes over how, you look at all these mass school shootings, for example. Guess what all those young males had in common? Single mother. And you can look up my articles to get the exact numbers, but basically almost all these shooters come from single mother homes. Whereas the kids coming from, let's say, single dad homes, there's something different going on, some different factor. And so these children are ending up turning out better and more likely to go to college and stay out of prison if they're even raised by single dads instead of single moms. So right. We've got to, start addressing the fact that these single moms can't do it on their own. These kids need a father. The fathers are super important in their life. And if the fathers aren't in the kid's life, they're at risk. They're at risk for doing bad things.
Yes, and this is where, when society, we change our attitudes about, especially the women that are coming out and trying to live a better life. We all make mistakes. We're all sinners before God. God cleanses us. And if someone's going to make a right decision, we should take the onus to make sure that we encourage them in the right choices, even if they made wrong choices before, right? Because the more people that we can get doing the right thing, because without solving the problem with the families, we will never fix the bigger problems with the country. Because each family is a government, it's a church, and it's the building block of your churches and your communities. And if your families are being done wrong, no government is going to fix that. And if you think that the government doesn't know this already, or the criminals in government, then why do you think they're doing everything they can to replace you and to take you away from your children so that they have more access and control than you? So we need to go back to like the simple things to help fix the bigger things. So they're all tied together, but we got to make sure that we fix the families and so forth. I agree that churches are good and they got to help, and some are better than others, right? Because each set of people, it's basically on the choices, because there's good and bad, but we want to get more good and so forth, and do everything that you can. And if you see something, call it out, whatnot, but we want to get the government as much out of the control and the business of doing that and doing it ourselves, because then you have that accountability to the people, rather than having people that go ahead and play the system and abuse the system. Because there are people who go ahead and abuse the system, and they incentivize this in many cases to abuse the system and not form families. We want to de-incentivize that and give them incentives to make the right choices. Make it more difficult to make the wrong choices, easier to make the right choices. That's kind of like how your parents discipline you. You did good, you got a reward. You didn't do good, you didn't get the reward. And if you really did wrong, then you got some punishment, right? And just that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's really where it's at. We're going to kind of close this off. We thank you for coming. What do you have for final statements on this whole situation in Arizona?
So I would just say watch and see what happens with Kari Lake's election lawsuit. I think that's what's going to happen. I don't think they're going to be able to pull it through with a ballot carrying at the last minute. The fraud was just too much. So, that'll be a bellwether whether, they're really going to start cracking down on election fraud or not, whether she gets anywhere with this case or not. Obviously, she got nowhere with her gubernatorial election challenge, which is still ongoing. So I don't have my hopes up. But to leave it on a positive note, the fact that they let Trump win is absolutely outstanding. So I think there is some decrease in the cheating.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think that this is where people need to come in and get more engaged and so forth, and let your voices be heard. You might not feel like you have any voice, but if your voice wasn't important, they wouldn't be taking all the steps to silence people. And so if you see what one single person can do, then what would happen when you have 100? or 1,000, right? And so let the people know what you want by showing it by your actions. Come together. Yes, Harry Lake is going to come in and challenge it, but the people should come in and use everything they can. We didn't get to this point where we're at by them using one method. They gave us a death by 1,000 cuts. Now we need to return the favor. And there are more of us than there are of them. So whatever way that you can, get behind something and support it. And like using these petitions, everybody's got a stake in it. Help Carrie, help everybody else, help your state, help those poor babies and children that need to live. Because the children, the young people, they have the most to lose out of this, right? Because, I mean, I'm much older. I'm not like old and gray and on a cane or anything, but an 18-year-old, my daughter, she's in her 20s. She has her whole life ahead of her. I don't. Like, I'm kind of past that middle section, right? The midpoint. So I've got less years to look forward to than I've already had. So we want to make sure that these guys have something to look forward to. And obviously, if you're a Christian, you want the work to get done and spend time with Jesus and not have to deal with this nonsense anymore. So we want that kind of stuff, and we want people to come together. And we thank you for coming and support Rachel. Support your independent media, because that is going to become ultimately important, because we cannot trust the people who've been lying to us all of these times. So again, I will close again with a prayer, because we need more prayer, because we need to have people turning their hearts back to God, because that is what made our societies great. It is what gave us prosperity. When people serve God, they get blessings. Yeah, sometimes you get some difficulties, but you're always better for serving God, and God will give you the strength to go through anything. And these times that are coming up, we need God's strength, especially the men. Because you guys, more women are following God, from what I can see, than men. So men, you need to catch up and start letting the women put you to shame. All right, I'll close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. Lord, we thank you for the work that Rachel and others like her are doing to bring out the information and the truth to the people, so that they can make good decisions on the evidence in front of them. And Lord, bring the men and women together, bring families together. Lord, let the men humble themselves before God, that we could lead our families, our communities, our churches, our nation. And Lord, bring some prosperity and peace to our children from this wickedness and evil that we are fighting in this time of darkness. Be with us and bless us this day is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Kaysha, over to you.
Oh yeah, thanks for the prayer as always, Dad. Thanks, Rachel, again for joining us today. I hope you guys keep up with what's going on with the election with Kari Lake. The cheating, I think, around the country is still, bad, considering the fact that it was too big to rig. But I'm glad that, like you said, Rachel, I think because they did in fact concede and let Trump win, I think that gives us a lot more hope in the other states where some of this cheating is happening, and here in Arizona as well, because there's a completely different shift in the mood of the country. And I know historically, I think we all know that the leaders and rulers, tyrant or not, have always been very cautious and afraid of the mood of the country. That was always the big question. What is the mood of the country? And right now, the mood of the country is going back to God, going back to tradition, going back to family, going back to true fairness, going back to what is right. And that means, operating in a certain way. And we are production. This is a Christian nation, and this is what the people have spoken for. This is what they want to see going forward in the future. They want things to be fair and just, and to let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. So, let it be done, and may the will of God be done in kind. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you guys in the next one. And to my dearest Karis, until we meet again, my friend, and we will ciao. Wait, are we